Hey guys, welcome to another episode of SEO on Air. As you guys know, SEO is an ever-changing field, is what most of the people say. There are a series of algorithm updates. There's a lot of new stuff coming in every day. People might be wondering, gosh, you should be keeping track of this forever. It's just changing forever. The real fact is that, the core tenets always remains the same. Be it whatever algorithm update comes in, the core tenets never change. That is the technical SEO part that covers on page, a good content, and a good link building strategy. These three things never change, it just stays the same. However, what works for one company might not work for everybody else. Maybe there are people who try to copy another website which is generating millions of traffic, and they think they're just trying and trying and probably waiting for 6 months, they're not generating enough traffic, and then they just give up. So what you might have seen even in the search results, while doing the competitor analysis, people would have been surprised looking at some websites, even with thin content, they still rank pretty well, some big brands. And you might have also seen some of your competitors having less backlinks, still ranking at the top. So the point is SEO does have a formula, but it needs to be tweaked for each and every business case. Now, to speak more about this topic, we have Mr. Stuart Pollington. He's the managing director of Smart Traffic. Stuart, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Stuart, I love this quote on your Twitter profile. It says, swimming against the tide isn't meant to be easy. That's the point. I'm sure there should be a story behind it when you put up that quote. Please, can you share with our audience more about it?
I think it was a long time I put it up there, but I think I remember it being related to SEO really. Not following what everybody's doing just because they're doing it. And that's sometimes, you touched on it on the intro. We follow the same core beliefs with SEO. Been doing this for a long time, 15 years, and there have been a lot of changes, but the core three things are still there. You focus on the technical, on the on-site, you focus on your content, and then you focus on a decent outreach link building strategy. So those three core things stay the same. But then obviously over time there are updates. You hear people shouting that this works and this works and this works. And I think that quote is more about, you don't listen to everything that you hear. Sometimes you need to kind of push back and go your own way and see what happens with the data, and sometimes trust your gut instinct in what's going to happen rather than follow what everyone else is doing.
Absolutely, Stuart. You are spot on that. During the early stages of my career when we were doing SEO, there's like a lot of stuff that we learn. I just used to imagine after a couple of years that what if I just implemented at least one strategy and stuck to it, right? It could have worked well, but we just kept on changing it. And SEO is a long-term game, and you put it right. So yeah, absolutely. So Stuart, can you share us more about your agency, Smart Traffic Australia? What do you guys do?
Yeah, Smart Traffic Australia, we're a full-service digital marketing agency. We started off many years ago focusing just on SEO for our own clients. Got fantastic results. We then started white labeling for agencies around the world. We run campaigns in obviously Australia, but in Asia Pacific, UK. We do a lot of white labeling for other agencies. And then we've obviously developed that over the years. So we don't just do SEO. We're also focused on paid advertising, whether that's with Google or Facebook or Instagram. So we kind of cover everything: web design, web development. But yeah, we originally started, it was all about SEO. And I think that's why we have a strong core of agencies that use us for their individual services, because we have that, track record.
Perfect. And also I heard that 2/3 of your people are more than 6 years experience in the same company. So it's quite good to know it. How do you maintain it? What's your secret sauce of maintaining the people stuck with this company? It's difficult these days for agencies, right?
Yeah, I chain them to the desk. They can't leave. No, joking aside, I think we just, we look after them. We look after the staff. They're happy. We make sure that they have some sort of progression. They can see where we're going as a company. Although we've got clients across the world, we're kind of a good core team. We work well together. And as you said, we've got some of the guys here who've been here over 10 years as well.
Wow.
So that helps
Right.
us because we have that experience and knowledge to look back on. And, it helps for our clients as well, because if there is a Google update or someone said something to a client and they're worried or they're panicked, oh, I've just read this, then we can say, okay, well, look, in 12 years ago, this happened, 8 years ago, this happened, 3 years ago, this happened,
Right.
so it gives us that experience, which, helps our clients.
Perfect. Well, from the agency side, Stuart, I have two big questions to ask you in this podcast. The first biggest question obviously is like before I get into the first question, I think you've already answered the main question, that is, should agencies be focusing like only on one strategy and copy pasting it on others? What's your take on that?
Okay, well, I always kind of, we still get it. We still get clients coming to us and saying, well, look, these guys do this, I want to do this, or why aren't you doing this? They're doing this. And I always liken it to, if my neighbor bought a red Porsche and I wanted my car to go faster, shall I paint it red? No, it just
That's a good
happens to be
analogy.
red. So
Yeah.
as you said at the beginning, just because you're looking at that site and you think, okay, we're both on WordPress, we both use these plugins, they both got this, and it's not.
Right.
It's more detailed than that. It's more intricate. And then also you've got different niches, haven't you? So, some niches are attract different types of links and content to other niches. So you can't cookie cut approach. You can't have an off-the-shelf strategy. That said, you still have the three core basics, which we talked about earlier. So every strategy for SEO especially does have to look at the technical on-site. It does have to have a form of content strategy, and it does need to think about how we're going to get other sites to link to us, how we're going to attract these links, which is still very important in Google's algorithm. So you've still got those three core pieces, and especially with the technical on-site, a lot of that might be similar across different sites and niches, but then your content strategy will probably change, and your link building strategy will change. And what we try to do, you mentioned competitor research before, we do look at what other sites are doing for the keywords or the niche that our clients want to kind of perform well in. But we're also looking at, well, when I do this search query, what's the intent? When I look at the first page of Google, what is actually ranking? Is it home pages? Is it big brands? Is it a lot of information sites? Is it mainly blog posts, or is it actually videos? And that will change again, depending on the keyword and the niche. So when you look at what others are doing, it's not necessary to copy the red paint, or, as I mentioned with the car, it's more to understand, well, for this query or this niche, these are the sorts of sites or pages that Google is seeing as relevant. How do I create a similar but better resource for Google to push me higher than these?
Right. Perfect. That's great, Stuart. Now getting on to the main two questions that I have for you. The first biggest one is, when agencies reach out to the clients, I think mostly these clients would be the founders, the CEOs, or there might be the marketing heads. They're always looking at how to measure the ROI, right? What is the input? What's the output? Yes, I can see that on SEM campaigns. I can always scale up, I can turn it off. But what about SEO? Because you guys only talk about keyword rankings, but for us, it's sometimes it becomes difficult for marketing people, because they do have their budgets and their CEOs will be asking about what's the ROI and sort of stuff. So what, according to you, because you've been in this industry for quite long, and you would have seen a lot of such instances, and you have a successful agency. So what is the best answer that you think as an ROI for SEO campaigns?
Well, personally, any campaign you do for anything, you would like to think that the best ROI would be the ROI, the return on investment. What have I spent and what have I got back? But especially with SEO, a lot of times that isn't the case. Sometimes you have brands or clients that they have what we call trophy keywords, for example. So they say that their objective is to get this keyword to the top of Google, and that is the campaign for them, regardless of what we talk to them about. And we're talking about the return on investment and how we can, multiply traffic and conversions. That might be their goal, and that might be what they really focus on. So when we do our reporting and when we look at the return on investment, we do focus on conversions, we do focus on traffic growth and performance, and we do look at where keywords are ranking, and we'll have that as a general report which we're talking about, and it will be a very much a focus on the conversions, whether that's a download, whether that's a form fill, whether that's a click to call. But then individually there will be clients that want to focus on a specific thing, and that might just be, as I mentioned, it might just be that keyword, or it might just be we want to double our traffic, or we want more downloads of this specific lead magnet.
Yep.
So I think as an agency, again, similar to the SEO strategy, you need to have like a core things that you're going to report on, but then you need to be flexible enough to make sure that you can also report on what's important to the client. And that should tie back to the original proposal and strategy that you put to place. So if the goal of the strategy and the goal of the client is to rank for these 3 keywords, then you can talk about conversions, but you do need to talk about what's happening with those keywords for them, because that was their goal. That was what they wanted from the beginning of the campaign.
Absolutely. And it's not like just reporting the metrics that people pick up on Google Analytics. It's interesting because the one that you mentioned, you're more focused on the conversions, the keyword growth, and all the other things. But what usually the agencies, when I've seen a lot of reports, they report the bounce rate, average time on site.
Yeah, bounce rate and average time on site, these are good things to be mindful of and look at. But at the same time, you still have to come back and think, what was the intent of the searcher and what was the intent of the page? Now, if a blog post has a lot of visitors and a high bounce rate, is that necessarily bad? Because a bounce rate just means they enter and leave from the same page. Now, if I'm looking for something and I find it on the page I land on, then I potentially will just bounce off. So the page itself and the content itself with a high bounce rate is exactly what that visitor wanted. It's then your job or our job to think, well, how can we make it stickier? How do we get them going from this content to something else? How can we maybe offer them something on this page that's related to the content they were looking for? Maybe a 5-step guide, or the first 3 things you should know about this, and try and get them to download something. In return, they will give us an email address, and then maybe we can shift them into an email marketing campaign at some point down the line. Maybe they will come back and inquire about what we do. A high bounce rate, a low bounce rate, you've got to, it's all about context. What is the page? What is the purpose of the page? The high bounce rate could be good in one instance, not good in another. Now, obviously, when we put our reports together, we still put these things in the report because, again, it's what people expect. But it's then our job and our account manager's job, and to talk through with the client and explain that, okay, in this instance, your bounce rate for this page is increased, but we believe it's because of this, and actually it's a good thing. And your time on site is maybe lower here because of this, whereas it's higher here. So it's everything's context, isn't it? It's, again, you can't just say all high bounce rates are bad.
Right. So basically just report a story about what's happening rather than just sending a bunch of numbers, so that it's pretty clear. And actually this ties up well with the ROIs to it, like I mentioned before, because when you report it well, then the clients can also easily attribute it to the ROI that they're getting.
That's it. It's harder and harder now to accurately report ROI on anything, isn't it? Because you've got the multiple paths that someone finds your site and interacts with you before they actually convert. You can't just look at the last touch conversion. You've got the whole path, and then it all becomes intertwined, doesn't it? So you might have a certain amount of conversions, but some of it is attributed to paid, some to social, some to SEO. When you add it together, it's more than the number of conversions you've had, but they've all helped each other. And again, similar, with a marketing approach, you should be touching on lots of different areas and ways to bring traffic and conversions, like an omni approach, isn't it? You can't just say, I'm just going to do this. So yeah, I mean, the reports we deliver, it's then the campaign manager's job with the client to kind of interpret what the data is saying to them. And again, if we had two clients with similar bounce rates, it might be good for one and not so good for another. And that's where our experience comes in. And I'm sure it's the same for you guys, that, you don't just take a data and send it, you present it, you go through it and you explain everything.
That's great to know. Now, Stuart, I did mention that's two questions. The first one is this. The second one is, how quickly can I get that ROI? People, they just get, it's because, I mean, they can't complain them, because when you notice on Facebook, the ads that come in, the promises that is being made, and the overload information that's pumping out every day on SEO. So people tend to think, yes, they can drive quick results. Now, can we expect quick results in the first place? I'm sure you'll say no, but is it advisable to change the SEO strategy midway, or how to advise the clients? What exactly goes behind the scenes in convincing the clients?
Okay. So quick answer to the first question, can you expect quick results? The quick answer would be no, with an asterisk, because, if you're working, let's say, with a good website and a good brand that has a decent presence, but their SEO on page or the way they've set their site up is not great on some of their other pages, some quick changes to the on-site content and some on-site optimization can actually give you quick results for those pages, because they're leeching off of the authority and the weighting of the overall domain. If we're looking at a brand new site or a site that doesn't rank and it's, and it's competitive, then how long is a piece of string, really? I mean, it can take, a few months to start seeing some, keywords and traffic coming onto the first page, or it could take, 6, 12, 18 months. SEO strategy is always long term. It's like a marathon, except the marathon never ends. But the only way to complete a marathon is start. You've got to start SEO. You've got to think about it as an ongoing strategy and an ongoing commitment. And it is not a race. It's it is a long-term strategy. There's bumps along the way, and you've got to be prepared to kind of adapt and change. And at the same time, remember that it's not just you and the other, your competitors are standing still. Every time you're doing something, your competitors are also doing something. So, generally what you will see is that you can see a site quite quickly move from ranking nowhere to page 10 to 5 to 4 to 3. It starts to slow down. Then you top of page 2, you hit the bottom of page 1, and a client's very happy because that's been quite quick. But once you're on page 1, it suddenly all slows down, and it's slower and slower to move up to the top of page 1, because you've got the competitors that are there. They're already there and established, and they're not standing still. You're trying to kind of catch up with them. And that's why it's very dangerous to kind of stop SEO or pause it. A lot of companies might say, okay, well, I'm happy with where we are for now. I'm going to leave it for 6 months. Well, I'm pretty sure the rest of the sites that are ranking are not just going to stop for 6 months. So, they're going to keep going. And over time, you're just going to, lose your visibility and, drop down again. So it is something that has to be consistent. So that was the first part of the question. What was the second part?
Well, the second part was like, what's the advice that we can go at midway? Because what's the advice that we should tell the clients? Because what happens is, when it comes to an SEO strategy, when it is presented, when the clients see that, yes, okay, so why don't you just increase the backlinks, right? Instead of 10, why don't you do 40, 50, so that instead of waiting for a year, I can get it done in 4 months or 6 months. So, like a formula, is that true? Like, is that the same way that's happening around, or?
Well, I mean, no, but I mean, years and years and years ago, if everything was equal, then you would just be looking at increasing your backlinks and saying, well, they've got this amount and I need this amount. But as you mentioned at the very beginning, there are sites that rank with great content and no links. There are other sites that rank with thin content and lots of links. So it isn't just like a one size fits all. You can't really kind of speed up the SEO process. You can improve it, you can make it a bit quicker, but you can't say, okay, if you plan to do this over 12 months, do it in a month and I'll be there in a month. It doesn't kind of work that way. I mean, the biggest thing with what we're doing with SEO in this industry, put aside the on-site and put aside the content marketing and the strategy, it's then about attracting the links. And, you do need links to rank, and it's important with Google. Google says, create great content, the links will come. It's not necessarily true. You do need to go out there. You do need to let people know that you've got a great site and great content. And you do need to kind of try and fish a bit to get people to link to you. If you're not ranking anywhere and you don't have, and you're not a big brand and you haven't got a big PR campaign, then it's not reasonable or natural for you to suddenly get hundreds and hundreds of links in a couple of weeks. You've got to think about, how do we make this, how is this natural? Well, naturally you maybe pick up a few mentions, and then like a snowball, maybe it would pick up. And as you get closer or onto page one, then you're more visible, and then you are going to pick up more mentions and links from other sites. So it's very, very difficult to put a time frame on everything or any of it. I mean, we try to look at, typically based on our nearly 15 years of working with clients and data, we typically look at, well, for a campaign to be working, we would expect at least 30% of the keywords that we're working on to be on page one within 6 months. Now, that is not necessarily going to give you your return on investment, but it is telling us that the campaign is working and we're on schedule to hit those longer term goals, which could be 12 to 18 months. And then again, that's why it's important to bring in the other types of marketing, so that you can get more of an immediate return on investment from Google ads and maybe paid Facebook advertising, and SEO is your longer term strategy. But as we all know, there becomes a point where the SEO will the return on investment from SEO will outweigh these other ways of doing marketing through paid. And it will be that you begin with SEO, the return on investment's low. At a point it almost matches the paid, and then it will take off, and your return on investment will be a lot higher from the long-term SEO strategy.
Right. Perfect. So Stuart, now coming to the basic question of any SEO guy's mind, like when it comes to a lot of changes are happening, and yes, we talked about the core tenets, and you also briefly touched upon the ROI calculation and all these things. Now, when you frame a SEO strategy, right? So nowadays, when we look at it, sometimes guest posts, they are suddenly being shown as a black hat, suddenly they are becoming as a gray hat. But what is a perfect strategy which you think can be like future proof and that could not give any sleepless nights to the SEOs?
A future proof. Well, I think we just come back to those three core areas again. So again, that's what we focus on, the three core areas being the technical on-site, your content, and some sort of backlink strategy or outreach strategy to get links pointing to your site. Now, at the moment, that doesn't look like that's going to change at all. So maybe there'll be different strategies and different kind of tactics and tweaks that will come in, but those three core will stay the same. So keep on top of the changes in how Google evaluates the technical side. Think about, how you set your site up, definitely page speed, think about mobile, all of that comes under the technical part. Then with the content, think about not just it's, content strategy is not just about blogging, but it's about the pages and the landing pages and the structure of your website and how that content is as well. And then thirdly, it's the popularity vote, isn't it? With the links and how, thinking about how you can get your name out there, how you can get popularity, how you can create resources that other websites want to link to. So that's your three core areas, which I can't see changing too much. Obviously everything, like we said, with mobile now and, and page speed, that just becomes part of the technical SEO part. So you've got those three buckets that I would focus on, but just you need to be flexible and adaptable. You need to be able to make changes along the way. But what's important is that because SEO is a longer term strategy, that if you are making changes, you're not just, it's dangerous to make changes based on a small set of data.
Yep.
So we all know that rankings fluctuate. And if a keyword drops a couple of positions, don't suddenly rip up your plan and change everything. You've got to be mindful that, you can't make changes on small sets of data. Rankings fluctuate. If you've dropped down a couple of positions, it might be nothing wrong with your strategy. It might not be that you've dropped. It's someone has gone above you because Google thinks they're better at what they're doing at the moment. So as a template, it would just be focusing on those three core areas. But I think it's hard to say always do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I don't think that's possible. I mean, when we start a campaign with any client, the first month we always do a technical site audit, and I'm pretty sure if I dug one out we used to do when we started and compare it to now, it would be there would be some things in there that are very similar, and there'll be things in there that are completely different and have changed.
Great. That was a great point, Stuart. People tend to do that. Suddenly when they see the 2 to 3 ranking drops, then the whole link building strategy changes towards it. The content strategy changes towards it, and it just goes off track. Awesome.
Exactly.
So Stuart, what are some of the tools that you use that you recommend the SEO folks to use? What's your favorite?
Okay, I think most of these I'm going to read out. I don't think there's going to be many surprises. I'm sure that agencies have their own ones that they like for different things. But generally, we would be using Ahrefs, SEMrush, and Moz maybe and maybe Majestic as well for keyword research, backlink audits for looking at keyword improvements and competitor analysis, for example. Separately, we would have some specific ranking software, and we've used multiple different ones over the years. We would use Screaming Frog and Search Console for when we're doing website audits.
Right.
Google Tag Manager to help install marketing tags, not just for SEO, but for Facebook and Google Ads. And then, Google Analytics for tracking and understanding the site visitors' behavior. I mean, Google Analytics as a free tool is very, very good. You don't need to go out and spend hundreds or thousands of dollars a month when you have something like Analytics, Search Console, and Tag Manager. That's all from Google. It's all free. It all gives you great insight. But again, you use the tools, but you still need the experience and the people to interpret what those tools are telling you. Because again, using the bounce rate or time on site as an example, just because it's saying this doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Another one with the tools, obviously the tools are automated. They've got to work on rules. So it might flag a long page title or a short page title as not being optimal. But then actually that long page title is on a blog post, and the reason it's long is because you've created it to improve the click-through. So you've got to think, okay, well, does it really matter that it's apparently a few characters over what the tool says, or is it actually fine as it is because it's improving? We've got a much better click-through rate, and that's the purpose of that page title.
Right. Absolutely with you on that, Stuart. Well, that's all I have to ask for today, Stuart. It was like a wonderful conversation. You shared a lot of insights. This is one of the core things that when we started out with these podcasts, Stuart, that, people who are the real deal, right? So you have quite a lot of experience. It's clear when you answer these questions. Your experience speaks a lot. We really thank you so much for spending time with us today. We really enjoyed this conversation.
I enjoyed it as well. Thank you for having me.
Great. So guys, whoever's listening to the show, please feel free to add your comments. We're going to do a blog about this podcast. We'll also give the links to some of the tools that Stuart mentioned, and also Stuart has also done quite a lot of blog posts. So we'll be linking out to some of his most recent ones so that you guys can check that out. And also feel free to send us your suggestions of how to improve our show. We know you guys know that we don't use any hardcore music and all the other fancy stuff in our podcast. We just wanted a raw deal, and we bring the people who are the real deal, and we just ask the questions that most of us have in our minds and get it cleared up from the industry experts. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Feel free to let us know, and see you soon.